Welcome to the Friday Casebook, our weekly chat about current affairs with Roger Casale. Roger, what happened in the world this week?
Well, there's been so much instability, isn't there? So much instability in the world, Lena, don't you think? And we've talked about the humanitarian crisis in Yemen a couple of weeks ago, and now we're witnessing the outbreak of war, even a civil war in the Middle East. It's a tragedy what we're seeing on our screens every day. And my reflection is this, Lena. I mean, the lockdown has turned everybody inward, every nation inward. We're all very focused on what's happening down our street, in our state, in our country, in our city. But I think when the lockdown ends, we will going to see much more violence, aggression, instability in the world, and especially in Europe's backyard. And Turkey and Russia, I think, are both playing a very dirty game. And Europe has been a sea of calm, really, in comparison with what's happening elsewhere in the world. And I think the fact that Europe has been so calm over such a period of time, a lot of this, I would say, is down to the leadership of Angela Merkel. And this is her last year in office. And so it's not so much Angela Merkel herself, Lena. I wouldn't want to call her the elephant in the room or anybody else that, but I think the fact that she is stepping down, that's the elephant in the room. And I think if we think back over her 16 years in office, she really has given Germany and Europe a tremendous amount of stability. If you think about it, she's helped Europe through 3 major crises. That's not even including Brexit. And the 3 crises were the financial crisis of 2008, the so-called migration and refugee crisis, because I don't like to call that a crisis. I think that was something important that Europe did, and Merkel showed great leadership at that time, and of 2015, 2016, and now the Corona crisis, as I say, not to mention Brexit. And I think that will be her greatest achievement, stability. And her 16 years in office, 4 election victories, that comes to an end this year. It'll coincide with the pandemic coming to an end. And I think if we were doing some sort of risk analysis of Europe, we would need to factor in that a prolonged period of instability, both internally and externally, may well lie ahead for Europe when Merkel goes. And we should be asking ourselves, I think, what can we do to make Europe stronger? And it won't be a surprise to you, Lena, when I say that at New Europeans, we think that making Europe stronger is about making Europe more democratic and more inclusive, and bringing the European project closer to the citizen. So I think a world without Angela Merkel is going to be a very different world. I don't think we have quite woken up to that yet in Europe. She has provided leadership over a long period and given Europe stability. And I think we need to think about the next period and where leadership is going to come from in Europe. And I hope that it comes from the citizens.
What else sparked your interest this week?
Well, it's at times like this, challenging times like this, when we sometimes need to look to the stars. And it is astonishing what is being achieved in space, and in particular with the NASA Mars mission. But just as Europeans colonizing America, North and South from the 15th century took diseases such as smallpox with them, which wiped out much of the indigenous population, so NASA needs to be careful that it does not take microbes into space. Now, it probably seems totally implausible that tiny stowaway bacteria could somehow hitch a ride on a spacecraft, but apparently this is possible. And not only that, but there is actually the fear that they could survive and multiply when they get to a planet like Mars. So that would be quite a welcoming committee, wouldn't it, when we do finally build the first human city on Mars and find that we're surrounded by rogue bacteria. And you might have thought, Lena, that it's tough wiping down surfaces and wearing a mask to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. But try deep cleaning your spacecraft of tiny microbes before sending it on a mission to the stars. That's a problem I'm very glad that I don't have.
Same here. Who is on the naughty step this week?
We were talking about Angela Merkel, And one of the things about Angela Merkel is it's very difficult to do satire with her. I mean, there are scenes we will remember about her treating Donald Trump like a little boy, or rolling her eyes at Putin, or that scene when Berlusconi jumped out from behind a tree to surprise her at a European Council meeting. But it's very difficult to satirize Angela Merkel. I mean, she's a very serious politician of great substance and stature. And I think the comparison with the Chancellor of Austria, Sebastian Kurz, couldn't be greater. I very much hope that Sebastian Kurz is not the new face of leadership in Europe. In fact, I hope he'll soon be shown the exit door. There was a brilliant takedown last week by the German satirist Jan Böhmermann, which we will leave a link to in the comments box for those of you who speak German.
Definitely worth watching, yeah.
You saw it, Lena, I'm sure. I know he's very popular in Germany, isn't he, Jan Böhmermann? So, but it's been a tough week for Sebastian Kurz, and he's on the naughty step this week. He was in Munich on Tuesday, ironically, to receive an award for media freedom from a German publisher. And I say ironic because Kurz, a little bit like Orban in Hungary, is a specialist in undermining media freedom. He subsidizes pro-government media platforms using the government's own advertising budget to reward them. That's straight out of the Orban playbook. And I know people say, well, he's 34 years old, he's young and apparently very handsome. But what's that supposed to be? That doesn't absolve him from behaving in a way that is sort of cronyist and nepotistic and corrupt. But it seems that people are prepared to turn a blind eye to this in Austria. I'm very, very surprised about that. I mean, there's so much not to like about the way Sebastian Kurz conducts himself, so much not to like about his friends. And he seems to have tripped up quite badly, though, this time, because it appears that he's helped one of his buddies into a highly lucrative position as the CEO of one of Austria's largest state holding companies. You know, Austria is still a very corporatist country, that state holding companies, and they're very lucrative positions. And one of his friends managed to secure one of these. I'm sure he's very good at what he's done, but he also seems to have had a helping hand from Kurz. Kurz told a parliamentary committee that's conducting an inquiry into political corruption. Remember, all this kicked off with the Ibiza Gate scandal a couple of years ago with Kurz's former coalition partners, an extreme right-wing party led by a well-known anti-Semite who was the deputy prime minister of Austria, which was quite remarkable in itself. He's gone. He was exposed by a German-led investigation, but the committee that was set up to investigate all that is also looking at Kurz, and they've had a look at some of his WhatsApp messages. Apparently Kurz is very fond of smiley emojis, and he sent several of these smiley emojis to his friend to tell him not to worry about getting this lucrative position as CEO of one of Austria's largest state holding companies. And as Ruth Wodak, who is a linguistics professor and commentator, and she's in Vienna, and she's also a member of New Europeans, wrote this week, in Austria, it appears to be the case that anything goes. Well, that seems to me to be the right question, and particularly asked from an international point of view. Is it really the case that anything goes in Austria, or is Sebastian Kurz going to be held to account? And if he is brought down, I mean, that'll wipe the smile off all those funny face emojis he seems to be sending his buddies in the House of Kurz, and let's hope it brings down the House of Kurz with him.
Who's our star of the week?
Star of the week, good friend at New Europeans, the president of Social Platform, the largest umbrella organization for organizations in Europe working to support communities, Piotr Sadowski. who was invited to speak last week at the Porto Social Summit called by Antonio Costa, the Portuguese Prime Minister, and attended by all top leaders in Europe, including Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel. And Piotr spoke brilliantly and made the point about renewing the commitment to the social pillar of the European Union. I know the speech went down extremely well, and afterwards he had a short meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron, who had a discussion with, as I understand it, about preparations for the French presidency of the European Union, and again making sure of the central importance of social rights and social protection in Europe. So let's have a look at this wonderful photo of, you might say, who's that, with Piotr Sadowski.
What's coming up? We
have the next in our Reflections on the Future of Europe series with Jelena Dzankic from the European University Institute in Fiesole, who's going to be talking about European citizenship, how we get it, how we lose it. She's done a lot of investigation into some of these golden EU passports, as they're called, the way in which some member states seem to sell passports so that people can have access to the European markets. I hope that nobody will tell that to Sebastian Kurz and his friends. Jelena will be with us on the 26th of May to talk about the sale of European passports.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you all for watching. Please join our movement, join New Europeans, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next time.
Press the button to subscribe. See you next time.